there's a specific kind of awkward that lives in certain families. You walk through the door after months away. Your parent is standing there. And instead of opening your arms and pulling them close, you do a kind of half wave or a quick side pat, where you just say hey from across the room and carry your bag to the guest bedroom while the moment passes and neither of you says anything about it. And somewhere in your chest, there's this small, strange ache because you love them. You know you love them. But the hug, the real one, the long one, the kind where nobody pulls away first, that hug doesn't happen. Maybe it never has. If that sounds familiar, this video is for you. Not to make you feel guilty, not to judge you or your family, but to help you understand where that distance came from, what it is actually telling you, and most importantly, what you can do about it. Because that awkward is not permanent. That distance is not destiny. And the relationship you want with your parents is more reachable than it probably feels right now. Let's talk about it. The first thing to understand is that the inability to physically express affection with your parents, the stiffness, the awkwardness, the hug that never quite happens, is almost never about the present moment. It is about the past. Specifically, it is about what was modeled for you in that home, growing up before you had any say in the matter. Psychologists have a term for the emotional and behavioral patterns we absorb in childhood from our primary caregivers. They call it attachment style. In your attachment style, the blueprint your nervous system built for how intimacy feels, whether closeness is safe, whether vulnerability is allowed, was largely formed before you were old enough to walk. There are 4 primary attachment styles. Secure attachment develops when a caregiver is consistently warm, responsive, and physically affectionate. Children raised with secure attachment grow up associating closeness with safety. Physical affection feels natural to them. Hugging their parents, as adults, does not require conscious effort. Then there are 3 insecure styles. Anxious attachment develops when a caregiver is inconsistent, sometimes warm and present, sometimes withdrawn or emotionally unavailable. The child never quite knows which version of the parent they're going to get, so they develop a hyper-vigilant relationship with affection, craving it intensely, but never fully trusting it. Avoidant attachment develops when emotional expression and physical closeness were consistently discouraged, either actively through criticism or dismissal, or passively through a parent who simply was not physically demonstrative. Children raised this way learn, at a deep neurological level, that closeness is uncomfortable, that needing people is unsafe, that the way to be okay is to need less, feel less, pull back more. And disorganized attachment, the most complex, develops in homes where the caregiver was simultaneously the source of comfort and the source of fear, where love and chaos lived in the same space, where the child wanted to run toward the parent and away from them at the same time. If the hug doesn't happen easily with your parents, the odds are very high that one of these insecure patterns is at the root of it. Not because you're broken, not because your parents are monsters, but because children absorb whatever environment they grow up in, and not all environments made physical closeness feel possible. The second thing to understand is that recognizing your attachment pattern is not the same as being trapped by it. This is where the research becomes genuinely exciting. For decades, the conventional wisdom was that attachment patterns were largely fixed, formed in early childhood and stable throughout life. The newer science tells a more hopeful story. Attachment is plastic. It can change. It changes through corrective emotional experiences, through therapy, through conscious relationship choices, and, critically, through the deliberate, repeated practice of the very behaviors that feel unnatural. In other words, you can learn to hug your parents, not just as a physical act, but as an emotional one. You can change the pattern. It takes work. It takes courage. It takes being willing to feel awkward for a while on the way to feeling something real. But it is possible. Thousands of people do it. The research confirms it. And the relationship on the other side of that effort is worth every uncomfortable moment it costs. Now, let's talk about your parents. Because this is not a one-sided story. Your parents also have attachment styles. They also carry the emotional inheritance of their own childhoods, of their own parents who had their own wounds, who came from their own families with their own patterns. The parent who never hugs you is almost certainly never hugged the way they needed to be either. The parent who deflects every emotional moment with a joke or a subject change learned somewhere along the way that emotions were not safe to have. The parent who goes rigid when you reach for them is not rejecting you. They are managing a discomfort that was installed in them before they even understood what comfort was. This is not an excuse for the ways their patterns may have hurt you. Naming a root cause is not the same as absolving the impact. Both things can be true. Your parents were doing the best they could with what they had, and their limitations cause you real pain. Holding both of those truths at the same time, without collapsing into either pure blame or pure forgiveness, is one of the most emotionally mature things a person can do. But here's why this matters for the hug. When you understand that your parent's stiffness comes from their own wound, when you can see them not just as your parent, but as a person who grew up somewhere, who learned something painful about closeness, who has been carrying that for decades, something shifts. The distance stops feeling like rejection. It starts feeling like limitation. And limitation is something you can work with. Rejection feels like a closed door. Limitation is an open door with a stuck hinge. So what do you actually do? How do you begin to close a physical and emotional distance that has existed for years, possibly for your entire relationship with this person? You start small, smaller than you think, and you start with language before you start with touch. The reason most adult children find it impossible to suddenly become physically affectionate with an emotionally distant parent is that the physical gesture arrives without the emotional scaffolding to support it. A surprise hug from someone you are not emotionally close to does not feel warm. It feels invasive. Both parties know the gap that exists between the gesture and the reality of the relationship, and the hug highlights that gap rather than bridging it. The bridge has to be built with words first.
The initial block
Small
secures
words,
the structure.
real words,
The bridge
the kind
is
that
now
cost you
active
something
at
to
level
say
3.
because they require you to be vulnerable, even briefly. Something like, "I'm glad I came," or "I missed you more than I realized," or "I've been thinking a lot about you lately." These are not grand declarations. They are not the opening of a difficult conversation about childhood dynamics. They're small offers of emotional honesty, small cracks in the surface. And most parents, even the most emotionally avoidant ones, respond to them because they're also carrying the longing for closeness. They're also aware of the gap. They just do not know how to cross it either. When you start making these small verbal offers consistently, visit after visit, phone call after phone call, you're doing something very specific. You are signaling safety. You're telling the other person's nervous system, "I am not going to overwhelm you. I'm not going to demand more than you can give. I'm going to offer something real and give you space to receive it." That signal, repeated over time, changes the relational environment. It makes closeness feel less threatening. It makes the hug possible. And when the hug does start to happen, when you lean in for a longer goodbye, when you reach out and squeeze their shoulder, when you sit close enough that your arms are touching, you let it be imperfect. You do not grade it. You do not compare it to the hug you see other families give each other. You receive whatever they can offer, and you offer whatever you can manage, and you let that be enough. Because enough, repeated consistently, becomes more. That is how it works. Let's talk about the grief. Because this conversation, if you're really having it, eventually gets to grief. There is grief in recognizing, as an adult, what was missing in your childhood home. Grief for the spontaneous physical affection that was not available. For the parent who could not say, "I love you," without it feeling stiff and foreign. For the comfort you needed and had to find elsewhere or learn to live without. That grief is real. It deserves space. It does not need to be rushed through or rationalized away. And there is a different grief, a more present tense one, that comes when you begin to think about time. Your parents are getting older. The number of times you will be in the same room with them is a finite number. The number of goodbyes that remain before one of them is a final goodbye is smaller than it once was. This is not meant to be frightening. It is meant to be clarifying. Because one of the most common things people say after losing a parent is, "I wish I had reached for them more." I wish I hadn't waited until I felt ready. I wish I had crossed the distance when I still could. You still can. That is the whole point. You still can. The research on physical touch between people who love each other is worth knowing. Physical affection, real physical affection, not perfunctory contact, triggers the release of oxytocin in both people simultaneously. Oxytocin reduces cortisol. It lowers blood pressure. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, producing a felt sense of safety and calm. A genuine, held hug, 15 to 20 seconds, which is longer than most people are comfortable with at first, produces measurable changes in the stress chemistry of both people. Which means the hug you cannot give your parent is not just an emotional loss. It is a physiological one, a real, biological resource that exists between two people who love each other and is going unused because neither of them knows how to begin. You know how to begin now. You begin by accepting that it will be awkward, that the first longer hug will feel strange for both of you, that your parent might pull back before you're ready, that you might both laugh nervously because neither of you knows how to be in this new territory. All that is fine. All of that is part of it. The awkward is not a sign that it isn't working. The awkward is what changing a lifelong pattern feels like from the inside. You begin with the language, small offers of real feeling, consistently, across time. You begin with touch that is not a hug yet, a hand on the shoulder, sitting closer than you normally would, a brief arm around the back as you walk through a door, small physical contact that habituates both nervous systems to proximity, that builds a groundwork. And then, when the moment comes, the goodbye at the end of visit, the hello after a long time apart, the quiet moment when it would be natural, you lean in. You hold on a beat longer than the automatic release would tell you to. And you let it matter. Because it does matter. More than words can fully express. The hug you give your parent when both of you are learning how, when both of you are a little scared and a little hopeful and neither of you is sure who is comforting whom. That hug carries everything. It carries the distance that existed and the choice to close it. It carries the grief and the love and the time that is left. It carries the courage it took to try. Not being able to hug your own parents says something about where you came from. Starting to hug them anyway says everything about who you are choosing to become. If this video touched something in you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like it if it helped. And subscribe for more honest, human conversations about the relationships that matter most. Go reach for them while you still can.